On cold nights, the house seems too big, especially when you lie in the bed where Martha used to sleep. 3 years have passed, and I still wake up and reach for her in my sleep. 75 years is a long time, but not long enough to get used to the emptiness. We built our house in Vergennes with our own hands. Well, mine. I've been a builder all my life. I started out as a laborer and ended up as a foreman. I'm not rich, of course, but I've saved up for a decent pension. Martha, she was a teacher. She taught high school math. They planned a lot of children, but only Darby turned out. It's ironic that we simple folk named our son an old aristocratic name. Martha read it in some Victorian novel and fell in love. I didn't mind. Let it be Darby. My son. It's hard to talk about him. Darby always wanted more. As a boy, he looked at my calloused hands with some ill-concealed disappointment. "Daddy, do you really want to carry bricks all your life?" he asked me when I was 14. I replied then, "Son, those bricks built the house you live in." Darby went on to study economics, not at a prestigious university, but he got his degree. Now works as a manager at an insurance company. He drives a decent car, wears suits, and calls himself a businessman. Although, in fact, he's just an office worker. It's not that I wasn't proud of him. I was, of course. But I realized that his ambitions would always be greater than his abilities. He married Lauren. I saw from the start that she was the kind of woman who could never have enough. Beautiful, well-groomed, works in a beauty salon as an administrator, always flipping through glossy magazines, ordering things online. In 20 years of marriage, she has never once invited me to dinner for no reason, only on my birthday or Christmas, and even then with a broken heart. Martha tried to make things right with her, but Lauren always kept her distance. The only ray in the family is my granddaughter Mabel, 11 years old and already so smart. Sensitive, attentive, always looking at me with such love that my heart melts. I think she looks like Martha in some ways, the same crease between her eyebrows when she thinks about something, the same hand gestures when she explains something complicated. In the last months of Martha's life, when the cancer was eating her from the inside out, Mabel came to our house every day after school. She sat next to her grandmother, read books to her, told her about her day. At 8 years old, she understood more than most adults. After the funeral, Darby and Lauren came by less and less often, first once a week, then once a month. They politely declined my invitations, business, work, fatigue. I knew I was reminding them of Martha, of her absence. And to be honest, I wasn't the most fun to talk to in those days. Mabel came by more often, sometimes even without her parents. She'd bring me her drawings, tell me about school. I used to make her Martha's hot chocolate with cinnamon and marshmallows. We would sit on the veranda, look at the garden I continued to maintain, and talk about everything in the world. My only real friend after Martha left was Talbot Harmon. We had met when we were young, working on the same construction site. He was a plumber, I was a builder. Both short-tempered, practical, understood each other half a word. Now widowed, we often met on Saturdays to play chess or just sit on the porch with a beer. "Eustace, you ought to find yourself a new hobby," Talbot told me. "You can't stay home all the time." "What hobby at 75? I waved him off. "It's too late for that. Come on." My cousin started playing the violin at 80. Now he pisses off the whole family with his concerts. But I just shook my head. It seemed to me that my life was already over, that only memories remained. Everything changed on the day Darby came to me with a serious talk. It was late August, a hot, sweltering evening. I had just finished watering Martha's roses. She loved yellow tea roses, and I kept them in perfect condition. Darby arrived in his Ford, unusually solemn. Usually he'd stop by briefly, say a few words, and then go about his business. But here he sat across from me at the kitchen table, refused a beer, and started from afar. "Dad, do you know that education is the most important thing in life now?" I nodded. not sure what he was getting at. Mabel's growing up, and Laren and I are thinking about her future. She's a smart girl, I agreed. Just like her grandmother. He didn't like it when I compared Mabel to Martha. Maybe he was jealous of our special bond. The thing is, Daddy, the community school in Vergennes, it just doesn't provide the opportunities that a modern child needs. Do you understand? I shrugged uncertainly. In my day, kids weren't categorized by school. Laren and I found a great private school, Lakeview Academy. It's one of the best schools in the area. Small classes, individualized attention, languages from first grade, robotics, art. I was half listening. I thought Darby was just bragging about finding a good school for Mabel. But then he got to the point. The problem is, it costs a lot. $5,000 a month. I almost choked on my tea. $5,000 for school, a month. The amount seemed astronomical. That's a year's pension, I mumbled. I know, Dad, but it's an investment in Mabel's future. Laren and I are making the best of it, but Darby hesitated, lowered his eyes. We don't have enough. I wouldn't ask for it, but this really is Mabel's chance. You want her to have the best of everything, don't you? I looked at my son and saw him as the boy who had once asked for a bicycle. Only now he wasn't asking for himself. He was asking for his child, for my granddaughter. Why this school? I asked. There are others, aren't there? Dad, you don't understand. Darby began to get heated. Lakeview isn't just a school, it's a gateway to life. Their graduates go to the best universities in the country. They have connections, acquaintances. It's nothing like high school. I thought about it. I had money. Marta and I had saved a decent amount of money over the course of our lives. We lived modestly and saved. Of course, $5,000 a month is a lot. But wasn't that what I was saving for? And didn't Mabel deserve better? All right, I said at last. I'll help. But I need to know that the money is really going toward Mabel's education. Darby brightened up. Of course, Daddy. I'll bring you all the receipts, schedules, report cards. You won't regret it. It's the best thing you can do for Mabel. That same night, I wrote my first check for $5,000. Darby was unusually cordial. He hugged me, patted me on the shoulder, even invited me to a family dinner the following weekend. Later, when I told Talbot about it, he shook his head. Eustace, you're like always. First you give the money, then you think. What's there to think about? I objected. It's for Mabel. I'm not saying you shouldn't help your granddaughter, but $5,000 a month, that's a hell of a lot of money. And why don't you pay the school directly? I dismissed what he said. Sure, Talbot's always been a cynic. But this is my son, my family. How could I not trust them? The following weekend, I did go to Darby and Laren's house for dinner. Their house was more modest than mine, a model home in a newer neighborhood. But inside, everything shone with newness, fancy furniture, a big TV, some gadgets I didn't understand. Lauren was unusually friendly. She kissed me on both cheeks, sat me in the best chair, even made my favorite molasses pie, a recipe I'd borrowed from Martha years ago but had never used. Daddy, we're so grateful for your help, she chirped, giving me a refill. You don't know what opportunities are opening up for Mabel. Darby nodded as he refilled my whiskey. In this school, the kids learn 3 languages from first grade on. Can you believe it? Mabel would soon be speaking French and Spanish as well as English. I nodded and smiled as I imagined my granddaughter shining at a prestigious school, perhaps winning awards, winning Olympiads. Perhaps she would become someone outstanding, a scientist, a doctor, a lawyer. Or maybe she will follow Marta's footsteps and become a teacher. The main thing is that she'll have a choice that I didn't have. Mabel showed up at the end of dinner. She had been at a friend's house and came home late. I noticed that she looked a little embarrassed when she saw me. Hi, Grandpa, she said quietly, hugging me. Hi, sweetie. How are things going at the new school? I asked with a smile. Mabel threw a quick glance at her dad, then back at me. Good, thanks, she replied uncertainly. Tell Grandpa about your new subjects, Darby encouraged her. We're learning a lot of new things, Mabel said vaguely. French? Science? What about new friends? I asked. Have you met anyone? Mabel blushed and lowered her eyes. Not yet. It's all new and I'm still getting used to it. Don't rush the child, Daddy, Laren intervened. Mabel needs time to get used to it. It's an elite school. All the children are from wealthy families. They need to find a common language. Sure, I agreed. Just curious. Mabel, show Grandpa your new uniform, Darby suggested. Mabel nodded and ran off to her room. She came back with a dark blue blazer with the school crest on it, a lake and a tree. It's beautiful, I said sincerely. Blue looks good on you. Thank you, Mabel mumbled. Mom, can I go finish my homework? Of course, dear, said Laren. There's so much homework at this school that she often stays up late, she explained to me. Mabel gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and disappeared into her room. I noticed that she seemed unusually tense, but I chalked it up to fatigue from her new study regimen. After all, transitioning to a new school is always stressful for a child. As I left for home that evening, I felt a strange satisfaction. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something important, something meaningful. My money wasn't just sitting in an account accumulating interest. It was working, creating a future for my granddaughter. As I passed Mabel's room, I saw a streak of light under the door. I knocked softly. Come in, came her voice. Mabel was sitting at her desk, her textbooks and notebooks in front of her. I didn't mean to interrupt, I said. I just wanted to say good night. Thanks, Grandpa, she smiled, but it was a strained smile. Is everything okay, sweetheart? I asked, noticing her tension. Do you like the new school? Mabel paused, rubbing the edge of her notebook. Yeah, sure, she said finally. It's just, everything's new. It takes some getting used to. I understand, I nodded. If you need help or just want to talk, you know where to find me. My door is always open to you. I know, Grandpa. Her smile was genuine this time. I'll come by the other day, okay? I'll be waiting. And I'll make your favorite hot chocolate. I left the room with a light heart. Mabel may have had a difficult adjustment period, but she'll get through it. She's a strong girl, just like her grandmother. As I drove to my house, I realized that Mabel hadn't shown me a single textbook or notebook from her new school. But then I pushed the thought away. She was probably embarrassed and didn't want to brag. Everything would be fine, I was sure of it. From late August to early December, I had somehow quietly transferred about $20,000 to Darby. Every month, a check for $5,000. Every month, the feeling that I was doing something really important for Mabel's future. And every month, some vague anxiety that I carefully chased away from me. At first, everything went smoothly. Darby visited me faithfully at the beginning of each month. We drank tea, and he talked about Mabel's progress at school, about the strict teachers and high standards. He mentioned some projects, some special programs. I nodded, wrote a check, and we parted ways until the next month. Gradually, though, I began to notice that something wasn't adding up in these stories. In September, Darby told me that Mabel was going to have a special science project, something to do with ecosystems. In October, I asked about that project, and Darby hesitated, then said it had been canceled because of a change in teacher. In November, he mentioned some French poetry contest that Mabel had supposedly entered, but when I asked to see her work, Darby mumbled something about strict school rules and changed the subject. Mabel stopped by less often than usual. When I asked her about school, she gave me one-word answers and quickly turned the conversation to other topics. Not once did she mention any friend from Lakeview, nor did she mention any teacher by name. When I tried to ask her more, she seemed to shut down, and her eyes filled with a strange expression of fear or guilt. One day in mid-October, I decided to surprise her by picking Mabel up from school and spending the day with her at an amusement park near Vergennes. I called Lauren to find out what time classes ended. "Oh, Daddy, that's so sweet of you," Lauren chirped into the phone. "But Mabel has an extra math class today. She's going to finish really late." "That's okay," I insisted. "I can wait. Text me the address of the school and I'll drive over." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You know, today's not a good day." Lauren's voice became strained. "Mabel's schedule is really tight, and then Darby's picking her up right after, and they have plans. Maybe some other time?" I didn't insist, but my inner discomfort increased. A week later, it was Saturday, the day of my usual meeting with Talbot. We were sitting on my veranda playing chess. It was a sunny but cool fall day. Talbot, as usual, was talking about his grandchildren. He had 4 of them, and he was proud to keep track of all their accomplishments. The youngest, Eric, can you believe he built a model airplane by himself? At the age of 10, he boasted, moving his queen. And Sarah had won the school swimming competition. I'd hoped she'd choose chess, of course, but what can you do? He chuckled. What about your Mabel? How is she doing at her new school? I paused, thinking about my next move, both in chess and in conversation. Honestly, I don't know, I said at last. She doesn't tell me much. That's strange, Talbot raised an eyebrow. Usually, kids like to brag about school stuff, especially if it's such a special school. Maybe she's having a hard time adjusting, I shrugged. You know, all those rich kids, the special rules. Maybe, Talbot agreed, but his tone made it clear that he didn't think so. Did you see the school? Been there? I shook my head. Offered to give Mabel a ride a few times, but Lauren always makes excuses. And you don't find that suspicious? Talbot tapped his finger on his temple. What do you mean? I frowned. I don't know. Talbot moved his bishop and took my pawn. It's just weird that you pay $5,000 every month and get no concrete information in return. No schedules, no grades, no school events. I didn't say anything. Talbot had always been distrustful, always seeing the worst in people. But he was my friend, and I knew he wished me well. One more thing, he continued, lowering his voice, though there was no one else around. Have you noticed that your son and his wife have been living more and more interesting lately? What do you mean? I didn't understand. Directly. Have you seen what Darby drives now? A brand new BMW. And Lauren's wearing some fancy coat. I saw her downtown the other day. They've also been seen at the Côte d'Azur, that new restaurant on the waterfront where a meal for 2 costs as much as my weekly pension. I was silent again. Darby hadn't told me anything about the new car, and when I asked him about Mabel's uniform, whether I should buy something for school, he dismissed it by saying they'd paid for it themselves. I don't mean to speak ill of your son. Talbot held up his hands in a conciliatory gesture. But facts are facts. You give a lot of money, and in return you get vague stories. Mabel doesn't share her impressions, you're kept out of school. And at the same time, your son and his wife start living the high life. Don't you find that, odd coincidence? Are you suggesting that Darby's lying to me? I felt the blood rush to my face. That he's taking money for Mabel and spending it on himself. I'm not suggesting anything, Talbot answered calmly. I'm only saying that you should take a closer look. Check, by the way. I looked at the board. Indeed, my king had been hit. How could I not have noticed? Talbot's thoughts sprouted like poisonous seeds in my head. I began to observe my son and daughter-in-law's behavior more closely, and what I noticed, I didn't like. In late October, at a dinner party at a neighbor's house, I overheard Lauren talking about the cruise she and Darby had booked for Christmas. 2 weeks in the Caribbean, she bragged. We deserved a vacation. I quietly asked her later, what about Mabel's school? Didn't they have a short Christmas vacation there? Oh, they gave 3 weeks this year, Lauren replied quickly. A special program. Mabel will stay with my mom for the first week, then we'll go back. After another week, I noticed Laren's new earrings, large stones, obviously not cheap. When I complimented her, she nonchalantly replied that they were a little anniversary gift from Darby. And in early November, when I dropped by unannounced, I found huge packages from expensive stores in the hallway. Lauren was embarrassed and quickly whisked them away, mumbling something about a sale and incredible discounts. But the strangest of all was Mabel's behavior. My cheerful, open-minded granddaughter was becoming increasingly withdrawn. When I asked her about school, she would answer in memorized phrases, as if repeating someone else's words. "Everything is fine, Grandpa. The teachers are very strict, but fair. I'm learning a lot. No specific details, no stories about school friends or teachers." Once when I asked if she wanted to invite any of her new classmates to her birthday party, she almost cried and ran off to her room. Lakeview Academy was supposed to have a fall concert at the end of November. I found out about it by accident. I saw the poster while driving by the school. Yes, I purposely drove there to at least get a glimpse of the building from the outside. I called Darby and asked if Mabel would be participating. "Oh, that concert is for high school students only," he quickly replied. "Mabel is still too young." "But the playbill says all the students are participating," I objected. "I'd like to come see it." "Dad, there's a very limited number of tickets." Darby's voice became strained. "Laren and I barely got 2. If I'd known you wanted to go—" "It's okay," I interrupted him. "Maybe next time." As I hung up the phone, I could feel the anxiety building inside. Something was definitely wrong, but I still couldn't believe that my own son could deceive me so shamelessly. It snowed on the first day of December, a rarity in our neighborhood. I decided to visit Mabel and bring her the new sled I had bought back in November. As I drove up to my son's house, I noticed the new BMW Talbot had mentioned in the driveway. Silver, gleaming in the sun, a work of art, and judging by the make, pretty damn expensive. Darby wasn't home, just Laren and Mabel. My sister-in-law looked displeased at my unexpected visit, but invited me in. She was wearing a new dress. I don't know much about women's fashion, but even I could tell it cost a lot. "Grandpa!" Mabel hugged me with genuine joy. "Did you bring the sled? Can we go sledding?" "Sure, honey," I smiled. "If it's okay with your mom." Laren pressed her lips together. "Mabel has math. She has to study for a test tomorrow." "Please, Mom." Mabel folded her arms pleadingly. "I've already memorized everything. The snow can melt before tomorrow." "Okay," Lauren reluctantly agreed, "but only for an hour, no more." Mabel and I went to the nearest park. She squealed happily as she rolled down the hill on her new sled, and I watched her, enjoying her carefree laughter. It had been a long time since I had seen her so happy. When we were tired from sledding, I bought us hot chocolate at the park cafe, and we sat down on a bench. "How's school going, Mabel?" I asked in a casual way. "Are you enjoying Lakeview?" Mabel's smile faded and she stared into her drink. "It's okay," she mumbled. "You don't like the new school?" I asked cautiously. "No, I do," she answered quickly, but she didn't look up. It's different." "Tell me about your new friends," I asked. "Have you made any friends?" Mabel was quiet, fiddling with the edge of her scarf. "It's hard to make friends there," she said at last. "Everyone's so right." "I understand." I nodded, though I didn't really understand. "And the teachers? Who's your favorite teacher?" "Mrs." Mabel hesitated. "Mrs. Bennett. She teaches science." "And what are you studying now?" "Ecosystems," Mabel answered more and more reluctantly. "Grandpa, can we talk about something else?" "Sure, honey." I stroked her head. "I'm sorry, I'm just curious about your life." We finished our chocolates in silence, and then Mabel asked to ride a little longer. I agreed, watching her go back to being the carefree girl I knew. On the way home, I decided to come around the other side. Mabel, does your school do any events for parents and relatives? I'd like to come and see where you go to school. Mabel shuddered and almost dropped the sled. I don't know, she said in a shaky voice. I'll have to ask my mother. But there must be some open classes, concerts, exhibitions, right? I insisted. Grandma always went to your school events. Grandpa, please. Tears welled up in Mabel's eyes. I don't want to talk about school. I backed away immediately, cursing myself for being tactless. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Let's not talk about it anymore. Why don't you tell me what books you're reading now? Mabel was relieved, and the rest of the way we talked about her favorite books and movies. But there was a growing uneasiness inside me. Something was clearly wrong with this school, or with what I had been told about it. The next day, I shared my observations with Talbot. We met at a small cafe in the center of Vergennes, an unusual place for us to meet, but somehow I didn't feel like talking about it at home. So Mabel avoids talking about school, Talbot said thoughtfully, stirring his coffee. And you've never seen one of her school projects, not one of her Lakeview notebooks. That's right, I nodded. And Darby and Laren always make excuses when I offer to give her a ride or come to a school event. And they've been living the high life, Talbot added. A new BMW, designer clothes, a cruise for Christmas. But that doesn't prove anything, I argued, though I was beginning to wonder. Maybe Darby got a promotion at work, or a bonus. Maybe, Talbot agreed. But don't you think it's odd that he didn't tell you about it, and that it all coincided with your monthly school payments? I lowered my eyes, not knowing what to say. Eustace, Talbot put his hand on my shoulder. I don't want to upset you, but you have to consider the possibility that you're being lied to, that Mabel doesn't go to Lakeview Academy at all. That's impossible, I shook my head. I saw her school uniform, and she was talking about her teacher, Mrs. Bennett. Uniforms can be bought for appearances, Talbot shrugged. A teacher's name can be made up. Eustace, I'm not saying this to put you and your son at odds. I'm just, take a closer look, and maybe check the facts. How? I asked, feeling completely lost. Well, for starters, you could just go to the school, talk to the administration, find out if Mabel actually goes there. Darby will know I'm checking up on him, I frowned. It would undermine his trust. Doesn't he undermine your trust? Talbot asked. If he's honest with you, you have nothing to fear, and if he's not, then you need to know the truth all the more. I remained silent, staring into my cooling coffee. Talbot was right, but I still couldn't believe my own son could deceive me so shamelessly. Using my love for my granddaughter to siphon off money? No, it seemed impossible. Think about it, Talbot said, finishing his coffee. I'm not saying you should jump to conclusions. Just find out the truth. You deserve it. I nodded, still immersed in my own thoughts. Was the old adage about the truth being liberating right? Or was it sometimes better to remain in the dark? That evening, when I got home, I sat in Martha's chair and stared at her picture for a long time. What would you do if you were me? I asked the image of my late wife. She looked at me from the photograph with her kind but determined eyes. Martha was always straightforward, always striving for the truth, even if that truth was bitter. I knew what she would say. She would have said I should find out what was going on for Mabel's sake, for the sake of our granddaughter, who was clearly unhappy about the situation. That night, I made a decision. I had to find out the truth, no matter how unpleasant it turned out to be. I owed it to Martha, to myself, and, above all, to Mabel. The week before Christmas, the Oxford Mall, a 20-minute drive from Vergennes, had become a veritable anthill. I didn't like places like that. Too many people, too much noise, too much of everything. But I needed to buy a present for Mabel, and I wanted to choose something special. This year, I made a tradition of buying her books, Not the usual children's books, but something that will make her think, something she will keep for years to come. Last month, I got her an illustrated animal encyclopedia. She dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. This time, I decided to get her a collection of legends and myths from around the world. Mabel had always loved fantasy stories. I found a bookstore on the second floor of the mall and spent almost an hour there, choosing the perfect book. The saleswoman, a young girl with green hair and kind eyes, helped me pick out a beautiful hardcover edition with gold embossing. "Excellent choice," she smiled as she wrapped the book in gift paper. "Your granddaughter will love it." "I hope so," I smiled back. "She's a smart girl who loves to read. Then she'll love it. It contains myths from all over the world with beautiful illustrations." I paid, thanked the girl, and left the store, clutching the neatly wrapped gift to my chest. I decided to grab a coffee before heading home and headed towards the food court. As I passed the boutiques with expensive clothes and accessories, I suddenly noticed a familiar silhouette. Darby was standing at the window of a Louis Vuitton store, talking to a salesman. I stopped, surprised. What was my son doing in such an expensive store? He didn't see me. He was standing with his back to me, completely absorbed in the conversation. After a few minutes, the salesman pulled a box from under the counter and opened it, showing me the contents. I couldn't see what was inside, but it was clear from the way Darby nodded and pulled out a credit card that he was going to buy it. Curiosity got the best of me, and I moved closer, pretending I was just looking in the window of a nearby store. Now I could see that the box contained a woman's bag, a brown bag with some kind of pattern and gold detailing. The salesman was saying something about a new collection and an exclusive model. Darby listened with a serious look, then nodded and held out the card. The salesman processed the transaction and returned the card with the check. I caught a glimpse of the amount, $4,999.99, almost $5,000. For the bag, my heart beat faster. $5,000, that's how much I gave every month to Mabel's school. Was Talbot right? Was my son really misusing that money? The salesman beautifully wrapped the bag in a branded bag and handed it to Darby. My son thanked him, turned around, and saw me. The blood drained from his face. "Dad?" His voice shook. "What are you doing here?" "Buying a gift for Mabel," I answered, showing him my bag from the bookstore. "What about you?" Darby shifted nervously from foot to foot, trying to hide the Louis Vuitton bag behind his back, though it was pointless. I'd already seen it. "Yeah, it's a Christmas present for Laren," he said finally. "She's wanted it for a long time. It's a surprise." "It's a beautiful bag," I said in a neutral tone. "Must be expensive." "Not particularly," Darby shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "It was a good deal. You know Laren, she likes pretty things." I nodded, pretending to believe him. But inside me, a storm of emotions was raging. I saw with my own eyes how much that bag cost. There was no discount. And this coincidence, the exact amount I was giving for Mabel's school, seemed all too obvious. "Are you leaving already?" Darby asked, clearly anxious to get this awkward conversation over with. "I was going to get coffee," I answered. "Why don't you join me?" "I'd love to, Dad, but I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Darby glanced at his watch with exaggerated concern. "Some other time, okay?" "Sure," I smiled, trying not to show that I'd noticed his lie. "Say hi to Laren and Mabel." "I will." Darby nodded nervously and headed quickly for the exit, clutching his bag tightly. I stared after him, feeling the anger and frustration building up inside. If Darby had really used the money for Mabel's school to buy expensive gifts for his wife, it wasn't just deceit, it was a betrayal. I never drank the coffee. Instead, I drove home, the thoughts in my head jumbled. Maybe I had it all wrong? Maybe Darby really did have extra income that he hadn't told me about. Maybe it was all just a series of coincidences. But deep inside, I knew the truth. Things were going too well, or, more accurately, too badly. Mabel's strange behavior, Darby and Laren's reluctance to let me go to school, their suddenly improved standard of living, and now this bag, for the exact same amount of money I was giving away every month. At home, I sat in a chair without turning on the light and stared out the window for a long time. It was beginning to snow outside, large flakes falling slowly to the ground, covering everything with a white blanket. I thought about Martha, about what she would have done in my place. She was straightforward, never avoiding confrontation if she thought she was right. But she was also wise and understood that sometimes you had to gather all the facts first before you could draw conclusions. Facts. I wanted facts, not suspicions. I decided it was time to do my own investigation. The next morning I called Talbot and told him about yesterday's encounter at the mall. I told you. There was no triumph in his voice, only sadness. Your son is using you, Eustace, using your love for your granddaughter. I'm still not sure, I said. I need proof. What are you going to do? I'm going to go to this school, Lakeview Academy, see if Mabel really goes there. That's a good idea, Talbot said. You want me to come with you? I thought about it. On the one hand, it would be nice to have a friend's support. On the other hand, it was a personal, family thing. Thanks, but I'll be fine on my own, I decided. I'll call you when I get back. Be careful, Eustace. Talbot's voice became serious. If your suspicions are confirmed, it'll be a hard blow. I know, I sighed, but better the bitter truth than the sweet lie, right? Talbot was silent, and I realized he wasn't so sure. After the call, I sat down at my computer, an old laptop I'd bought back in Martha's day. I wasn't much of a friend of technology, but I knew how to do basic things. I typed Lakeview Academy Virgins into a search engine and found the school's website. The site looked impressive. Beautiful pictures of a modern building with big windows, a well-maintained campus, happy kids in dark blue uniforms. I read about the curriculum, teacher qualifications, extracurricular activities. It all looked very solid and expensive. The fees section did state the amount, $5,000 a month. At least Darby hadn't lied about that. I wrote down the address of the school and decided that I would go there today, without telling anyone, without calling ahead. Just show up there and ask to see the principal or someone in the administration. The school was in the suburb of Vergennes, about 30 minutes from my house. It was a beautiful neighborhood with big houses and manicured lawns. Lakeview Academy lived up to its name. It was located on the shore of a small lake surrounded by trees. The school building looked exactly like the pictures, modern, stylish, with large windows and neat brickwork. In front of the entrance there was a sign with the name of the school and the coat of arms, the image of a lake and a tree. I parked my car in the visitors' parking lot and headed for the main entrance. My heart was pounding like crazy. What would I say? How would I explain my visit? And what if my suspicions were confirmed? Inside, the school looked even more impressive than outside. A spacious lobby with a marble floor, walls hung with diplomas and awards, glass cases with cups and medals. Everything screamed prestige and high standards. Behind the reception desk sat a young woman with a friendly smile. "What can I do for you?" she asked as I approached. "Good afternoon," I tried to speak confidently. "I would like to speak to someone from the administration. It's about my granddaughter, Mabel Havisham." The woman nodded and started looking something up on the computer. Havisham, she mumbled, flipping through some lists. "Strange, I don't see that surname in our database. Are you sure your granddaughter is a student here?" I felt the ground slipping from under my feet. "She should be," I mumbled, "since September of this year. 5th grade." The woman checked the computer again, then shook her head. "I'm sorry, but we don't have a student by that name. Perhaps you have the wrong school." "No way," I objected. I know for a fact that my granddaughter goes to Lakeview Academy. Yeah, I pay her tuition." The woman looked puzzled. "Just a minute," she said. "I'll get our principal, Mrs. Inskip. Perhaps she can clarify the situation." She picked up the telephone and spoke quietly to someone. A few minutes later, a woman in her late 50s or early 50s with short graying hair and penetrating gray eyes emerged from the hallway. "Good afternoon." She extended her hand to me. "Fiona Inskip, director of Lakeview Academy. Can I help you with something?" "Eustace Havisham." I shook her hand, feeling the anxiety building inside. "I'm looking for information about my granddaughter, Mabel Havisham. She's supposed to be in your school starting in September." Mrs. Inskip frowned. "Havisham." She turned to the woman behind the counter. "Jessica, have you checked all the lists?" "Yes, Mrs. Inskip," she nodded. "There are no Havishams in our database, not in any class." The principal turned to me with a concerned look on her face. "Mr. Havisham, I'm afraid there's been a mistake. We really don't have a student by that name." "That's impossible." I felt my heart begin to beat faster. "My son told me that Mabel studies here. I pay her tuition every month, $5,000. There was a look of understanding on the principal's face and then something akin to sympathy. "Mr. Havisham, maybe we should talk in my office," she suggested, pointing to the hallway. I nodded silently and followed her. We walked down the long hallway, past classrooms that were filled with the voices of teachers and students. Everything seemed so real. But if Mabel didn't study here, then where was my money going? The principal's office was large and bright. Mrs. Inskip pointed to the chair across from her desk and sat down in it. "Mr. Havisham," she began cautiously, "I don't know what your son has told you, but there has never been a student named Mabel Havisham in our school. Not this year, not last year. But, I couldn't find the words. But what about, Darby told me. He showed me Mabel's uniform with your insignia on it. You can buy uniforms at our school dress store," Mrs. Inskip said softly. "It's open to everyone. But that doesn't mean the child goes to our school." "I don't understand," I shook my head, feeling the anger building up inside. Why did Darby have to tell me that Mabel went to school here? Why did he ask for money to pay for it? Mrs. Inskip sighed. "Mr. Havisham, I do not know your son and cannot judge his motives, but if you did give him money to pay our school fees, that money never reached us, because Mabel was never registered as our student." I sat there stunned by this information. All those months, all that money. Darby had lied to my face, used my love for my granddaughter to extort money. And Mabel. Poor Mabel had to maintain this deception, pretending to go to a school she probably didn't even know about. "Mr. Havisham?" Mrs. Inskip's voice brought me back to reality. "Are you all right?" "No," I answered honestly. "I'm not okay. I just found out that my son—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "I'm so sorry," she said sincerely. "It must be a hard blow for you." I nodded, unable to speak. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Where does Mabel go to school? In a normal school? Does she know about the deception? And what should I do with this information now? I have to go," I finally said, standing up. "Thank you for your help." "Of course," Mrs. Inskip stood up as well. "If there's anything else I can do to help—" "No, thank you," I shook my head. "You've already helped. Now I know the truth." She walked me to the exit of the school. I felt her sympathetic gaze on my back as I walked to my car. When I got behind the wheel, I didn't start the engine right away. I needed to collect my thoughts, to calm down. My hands were shaking with anger and frustration. How could Darby do this? How could he use his own daughter in his lies? I pulled out my cell phone and dialed Talbot's number. "What's up?" he asked in lieu of a greeting. "You were right," I said bitterly. "Mabel doesn't go to Lakeview Academy. She never has. All of this, it was all a lie." "Damn it," Talbot swore. "I'm sorry, man. I really am. I don't know what to do," I admitted. "Confront Darby? Talk to Mabel? I don't even know if she knows." "Calm down first," Talbot said. "Don't jump to conclusions. Perhaps Mabel knows nothing about this deception. Maybe she just goes to a normal school and doesn't realize that her parents are using her name to scam money out of you." "Maybe," I agreed. "But what am I supposed to do?" "I think you should talk to Mabel, gently, without accusations. Just find out what she knows. And then? And then you'll decide what to do about Darby and Laren," Talbot said. "But remember, whatever you decide, Mabel is not to blame for this situation. She's a victim, just like you." I nodded, though Talbot couldn't see it. "Thanks, man. I'll call you later." I hung up and started the car. I drove home slowly, trying to make sense of the situation. My own son had cheated on me, using my love for my granddaughter to scam me out of money he spent on expensive gifts for his wife, a new car, cruises. I felt betrayed, used, but it was Mabel who worried me the most. What did she know about this? Did her parents make her lie to me? Or was she just going to a normal school, unaware of her father's machinations? When I got home, I sat in my chair and stared at Martha's picture for a long time. What would she do in my place? How would she deal with a son who had used his family so cynically? I didn't know the answers to these questions. I didn't know what to do. But one thing I did know was that I had to protect Mabel. I had to make sure that Martha and I put our hard-earned money to good use for our granddaughter and not for the whims of my son and his wife. But how do I do that? How to maintain a relationship with my granddaughter while holding her parents accountable? I had no idea, and that made it even harder on my soul. After the discovery at Lakeview Academy, I couldn't just sit back. But I needed time to calm down and decide how to proceed. If I'd gone straight to Darby, I'm afraid our conversation would have ended very badly. Anger is a bad counselor, especially when it comes to family. So I decided to talk to Mabel first, to get her side of the story, to see what she knew about the deception. I didn't want our conversation to take place at Darby and Laren's house, where they might interfere or overhear. So I called and invited my granddaughter over for the weekend. "Grandpa?" I could hear the surprise in Darby's voice when he answered the phone. "Is something wrong?" "Nothing much." I tried to keep my voice calm, even though I was seething inside. "I just wanted to spend time with Mabel. Can she stay with me Saturday night?" "Sure," Darby agreed too quickly. "I'll bring her back in the morning." "Great," I said. "I'll be waiting." I hung up the phone and took a deep breath. The first step had been taken. Now I had to get ready to talk to Mabel. I didn't want to scare her or make her feel guilty, but I needed the truth. Saturday morning, Darby drove Mabel to my house. She jumped out of the car with her backpack and ran to hug me, but Darby didn't even get out, just waved out the window and drove away. I guess he was in a hurry, maybe to go shopping with my money. "Grandpa!" Mabel gave me a big hug. "I'm so happy to see you." "Me too, sweetheart," I smiled, hugging her back. "I have a surprise for you." I pulled out a book I'd bought at the mall from behind my back. Mabel's eyes lit up when she saw the cover. "Myths and Legends," she exclaimed. "Thank you, Grandpa. This is so great." "I knew you'd like it," I stroked her head. "Let's go inside. I made your favorite hot chocolate." We spent the morning leafing through the new book. Mabel enjoyed looking at the illustrations and reading aloud passages from different myths. I watched her, enjoying her genuine enthusiasm. How much she looked like Martha, the same wrinkle between her eyebrows when she read intently, the same hand gestures when she explained something. After lunch, we went out into the garden. The day was surprisingly warm for December. We sat on a bench, Mabel telling me about her friends, her school projects, the books she had recently read. I listened intently, taking in the details. She never once mentioned Lakeview Academy or any special school subjects, like robotics or the 3 foreign languages Darby and Laren had bragged about. Finally, I decided it was time for a serious conversation. "Mabel," I began gently, "tell me about your school. Do you like it?" "Yes, very much," she nodded. "Especially the science lessons. Miss Pringle lets us do experiments every week. Last week we studied photosynthesis and—" "Wait," I interrupted her. "Miss Pringle? Is that your teacher?" "Yes." Mabel looked a little puzzled. "She teaches science and math. Why?" "Nothing. It's just—" I hesitated for a moment, searching for words. "What school do you go to, Mabel?" "Vergen Elementary," she said, as if it were the most obvious fact in the world. "You know that, Grandpa." I felt a lump come up in my throat. So she really didn't know about Lakeview Academy. "Have you ever heard of a school called Lakeview Academy?" I asked. Mabel thought for a moment and then shook her head. "No, I don't think so. What kind of school is it?" I took a deep breath. How could I explain the situation to her without ruining her relationship with her parents? "Mabel, I need to have a serious talk with you. This might be a little, uncomfortable. But I want you to know that no matter what happens, I will always love you and support you." She looked at me with wide-open eyes, suddenly alarmed. "What's wrong, grandfather? Did I do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart, it's not your fault," I hastened to assure her. "The thing is, your parents told me that you go to a private school called Lakeview Academy. They said it was a very prestigious school with a special program, with multiple languages and other advanced subjects." Mabel looked at me with obvious bewilderment. "But I never went to a school like that. I always went to Vergen Elementary." "I know," I nodded. "I went to Lakeview Academy yesterday and found out you were never there." "But why did Dad and Mom tell you I was studying there?" She looked confused and worried. I took her hand, trying to speak as gently as possible. "You see, Mabel, it costs a lot to go to a school like that. $5,000 a month. Your parents told me that they needed that money for your education, and I gave them that money every month starting in September." Mabel looked at me, gradually realizing what I was saying. Her face turned pale, her eyes filled with tears. "Are you telling me that Daddy and Mommy cheated on you? Taking money from you for a school I don't even go to?" I nodded, unable to say those words out loud. Seeing my childhood faith in my parents crumble was unbearable. "But why?" she whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Why did they have to lie?" "I don't know, honey," I answered honestly. "Maybe they needed the money for other things. Maybe they thought they were doing it for your good in some other way." "For my good?" Mabel shook her head, her small shoulders shaking with restrained sobs. "They made you give up so much money for nothing. It's not fair." "Mabel, listen to me." I put my arms around her, pulling her close to me. "Whatever happened, it's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. And I don't want you to feel guilty or responsible for your parents' actions." "But I should have suspected something," she sobbed. "They sometimes said weird things about school, asked me not to tell you certain details. I thought it was some kind of game or surprise for you." "Of course you couldn't know," I stroked her back, trying to reassure her. "You're a child, Mabel. Children are supposed to trust their parents. It's not your fault they abused that trust." Mabel cried against my chest, and I could feel her little body shaking with sobs. I held her tightly, letting her cry. My heart was breaking with pain for her. "What's going to happen now?" she finally asked, raising her tear-stained face to me. "Won't you give them any more money?" "No," I said firmly. "I won't give your parents money for a school that doesn't exist." "They'll be mad," Mabel whispered. "Especially Mom. She always gets mad when things don't go according to her plan." "Let them be mad," I said, trying to keep my voice calm even though I was seething with anger inside. "It's not your problem, Mabel. And don't worry, I won't let them blame you or punish you for telling me the truth. You promise?" There was such hope in her eyes, such trust, that I would have sworn anything. "I promise," I kissed her forehead. "I will always protect you, Mabel. Always. We sat like that for a while, just holding each other. I could feel her gradually calming down, her breathing becoming more even. Finally, she pulled away and wiped her eyes. "You know, Grandpa," she said with unexpected wisdom in her voice, "I think Mom and Dad are very confused. They always want to seem richer and more important than they really are, always comparing themselves to others. Maybe they need help." I looked at her in amazement. In her 11 years, she showed more empathy and understanding than many adults I knew, including her own parents. "Maybe you're right," I agreed, though inside I was still seething with anger at Darby and Laren. But first they need to realize what they did wrong and apologize sincerely. "Will you talk to them?" Mabel asked. "Yes," I nodded. "I need to talk to them. But don't worry about that now. Let's just enjoy our day together, okay?" Mabel nodded, and we spent the rest of the day reading her new book, cooking dinner together, and watching her favorite cartoon. I tried to do my best to make her forget about the hard conversation, at least for a while. When I put her to bed in the guest room in the evening, she already seemed calmer. But before she fell asleep, she suddenly grabbed my hand. "Grandfather," she said seriously, "you're not going to stop loving Daddy because of this, are you? He is your son, after all." I looked into her concerned eyes and didn't know what to say. The truth was, I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive Darby for this deception. "I will always love your father, Mabel," I finally said. "But sometimes love is complicated. Sometimes we have to be hard on the ones we love to help them be better." She nodded, accepting that answer, and closed her eyes. I sat next to her until she fell asleep and then quietly left the room. The next morning I drove Mabel home. We agreed that she would not tell her parents about our conversation. I said I would talk to them myself when the time came. She hugged me tighter than usual before entering the house, and I felt my heart squeeze. How much I loved that girl, and how angry at those who had used her in their deception. I decided not to put off the unpleasant conversation. That evening I called Darby and told him I wanted to talk to him and Laren about an important matter. He sounded a little concerned, but agreed to meet at their house after dinner. At 7 o'clock that evening, I stood at their door. My heart was pounding and my palms were sweating. I couldn't remember the last time I'd been so nervous, but I knew I had to go through with it. For Mabel, for me, and maybe even for Darby and Laren's sake, though it was hard for me to think of their good in that moment. Darby opened the door, a strained smile on his face. "Dad, come on in," he said, letting me into the house. "Mabel's already asleep, so we can talk in peace." In the living room, Lauren was sitting on the couch, leafing through some glossy magazine. She looked up when I walked in and smiled her fake smile. "Eustace, what a pleasant surprise," she said, though my visit was clearly not a surprise. "Tea? Coffee?" "Nothing, thank you." I sat down in the chair opposite them. "It won't take me long." They looked at each other, obviously sensing the tension in my voice. "Is something wrong?" Darby asked, trying to sound casual. "Yes, it did." I looked him straight in the eye. "I was at Lakeview Academy." The color drained from their faces almost simultaneously. Darby opened his mouth, then closed it, unable to find the words. Laren froze, the magazine falling out of her hands. "Interesting place," I continued calmly. "Very impressive. You know what the most amazing thing is? No Mabel Havisham ever went there." The silence that hung in the room was almost palpable. Darby and Laren looked at me like rabbits at a snake. "Dad, I can explain," Darby finally said. "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "I'd love to hear you explain why you lied to me about Mabel's school and took money from me for tuition that didn't exist." "That's not exactly true," Laren interjected, coming to her senses quickly. "We were going to transfer Mabel to Lakeview, really, but there were some enrollment issues. We didn't want to upset you, so you decided to keep taking money from me and spending it on your own?" I finished it for her. "A new car, expensive clothes, $5,000 Louis Vuitton bags." Darby flinched at the mention of bags. He remembered our meeting at the mall. Dad, listen. He leaned forward, lowering his voice even though no one else was in the house. Yes, what we did was wrong. But you have to understand, we needed that money. I'm in trouble at work. My paycheck's been cut and we have so many expenses. And instead of honestly asking for help, you decided to cheat me using my love for my granddaughter? I shook my head. Darby, I never thought you were capable of such a thing. What were we supposed to do? Laren suddenly snapped at me. Just show up and say, give us the money. You wouldn't. You've always been so stingy, saving up money like you're going to live forever. Are we supposed to live in squalor while you sit on your savings? I stared at her, amazed at her insolence and shamelessness. Poverty? I repeated incredulously. You live in a nice house. You have 2 cars. You can afford a vacation every year. How can you call that poverty? You don't understand. Lauren shook her head. It's not enough nowadays. Everyone we know lives better. The Simmonses have a new swimming pool. The Pattersons sent their children to private school. And that's why you decided to deceive me? I interrupted her. To keep up with the neighbors? Dad, we wanted what was best for Mabel, Darby interjected, seeing that the conversation was taking an unpleasant turn. We were really going to move her to Lakeview. It's just not right away. In the meantime, you're spending the money on bags and cruises? I couldn't contain my sarcasm. That's very noble of you. You have no right to judge us. Lauren crossed her arms over her chest. You've always been so cold, so aloof, never interested in our lives, our problems, and now you've suddenly decided to play the role of a caring grandfather? Lauren, Darby said warningly, but she didn't stop. No, let him hear. She raised her voice. You've always loved money more than people, Eustace. You've always been a cheapskate. And now you resent us for taking a little from something you would have just put in the bank anyway. I stared at her, feeling the anger building up inside, but I didn't let it take over. Do you know what the saddest thing about this situation is, Laren? I asked quietly. That you used Mabel in your lies, forced her to be a part of this deception. Mabel didn't know anything, Darby said quickly. We never told her. I know, I nodded. I talked to her yesterday. She was shocked to find out that you lied to me about her school. Did you tell her? Darby turned even paler. Why? Why would you involve the child? I didn't involve her, I said firmly. You put her in the middle of your lies. I just wanted to get the truth firsthand. And now what? Laren asked, a challenge in her voice. Are you going to stop helping us? Leave your granddaughter without support? Mabel will never go without my support, I answered. But I will no longer give you the money you spend on your whims instead of her education. After my conversation with Darby and Laren, I lay awake all night. I tossed and turned in bed, going over what I had heard in my head, trying to make sense of my own son's betrayal. How many times over the years had I turned a blind eye to his petty deceptions, to his desire to appear better, richer, more successful than he really was? How many times had I told myself that it was just his personality, his way of coping with life? But this time, he'd gone too far, using his own daughter as an excuse to scam money out of him. It was unforgivable. By morning, I had made a decision. If Darby and Laren couldn't provide Mabel with a decent education, couldn't even be honest about their financial problems, then I would take matters into my own hands. I couldn't let my granddaughter suffer because of her parents' greed and irresponsibility. I called Lakeview Academy right after breakfast and asked to see the principal. To my surprise, Mrs. Inskip agreed to see me the same day. Perhaps she remembered our previous conversation and realized the situation was serious. This time, as I drove up to the school, I looked at her with different eyes, not as a place of deception, but as a possible future for Mabel. The building with the big windows, the well-maintained grounds, the sports fields, it all looked impressive and promising. Could Mabel study here? Would this school be a good fit for her? I didn't know, but I was determined to find out. Mrs. Inskip met me in her office just as she had last time, but her eyes were no longer wary, only genuinely interested and sympathetic. "Mr. Havisham," she held out her hand to me, "it's good to see you again. What can I do for you?" I shook her hand and sat down in the chair she offered me. "Mrs. Inskip, I've come to inquire about your school's admission requirements for my granddaughter, Mabel Havisham." She raised her eyebrows slightly in surprise, but said nothing about our previous meeting. Instead, she pulled a folder of papers from her desk drawer and placed it in front of me. "In order to enter 5th grade in the middle of the school year, we will need a few things," she began in a businesslike tone. "First, your granddaughter's academic history, report cards, teacher recommendations, standardized test scores, if any. Second, she will need to take our own testing so we can assess her level of knowledge and readiness for our program. And finally, an interview with a psychologist and with the school administration would be required." I nodded, listening intently. It sounded serious, but doable. "What about payment?" I asked bluntly. "The tuition is $5,000 a month," Mrs. Inskip confirmed. "That includes all school materials, uniforms, meals, and most extracurricular activities. Only some special field trips and activities are extra. And if I want to pay tuition directly to the school without any middlemen." "It's standard practice," she nodded. "Most of our parents prefer this method of payment. We can set up automatic monthly payments from your account or accept checks." "Okay," I took a deep breath. "And when can Mabel start school if she passes all the tests and interviews?" Mrs. Inskip thought for a moment. "Considering it's December and Christmas vacation is coming up, I'd say the best option is early January, starting with the new semester. That would give us time to run all the necessary tests and prepare her for the transition." "Sounds reasonable," I agreed. "What do I need to do right now?" "Fill out an application," she handed me a form, "and pay the $1,000 application fee. It's a non-refundable fee that covers the cost of testing and processing." I took the form and started filling it out. Name, date of birth, address, contact info. Suddenly I realized the problem. "Mrs. Inskip, there is one thing," I said, raising my eyes from the paper. "I am not Mabel's legal guardian. They are my son and daughter-in-law, and frankly they and I have a complicated relationship." She nodded understandingly. "Yes, I guessed that the situation was complicated. In that case, we'll need at least one parent's signature on the application. Without that, we can't accept the child." I sighed. That made it difficult, but it didn't make it impossible. "I'll talk to my son," I said firmly. "I'm sure I can convince him that it's in Mabel's best interest." "Very well," Mrs. Inskip smiled. "In the meantime, I can sign Mabel up for a pretest. It's not binding, but it will give us an idea of her academic level and help us determine if she's a good fit for our program." "Thank you. I'd appreciate that." I nodded. "There's one more thing, Mr. Havisham." Mrs. Inskip lowered her voice, as if she were about to share a secret. "We have a small scholarship program for especially gifted children. If Mabel is really talented, as you say, she might qualify for a partial tuition reimbursement. It's not guaranteed, but it's possible." I was touched by her willingness to help, but shook my head. "Thank you for the offer, but I'm able to pay the full cost. Let the scholarship go to someone who really needs it." Mrs. Inskip smiled with obvious approval. "That's very noble of you, Mr. Havisham. Not all grandparents are willing to invest so much in their grandchildren's education." "Mabel is the most important thing I have," I replied simply, "and I want to give her all the opportunities I couldn't give her father. We agreed on a testing date, in 3 days, on Wednesday. I paid the admission fee, received an information packet about the school and the curriculum, and we said goodbye. As I walked out of the school, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if a heavy weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I had a plan, a goal that seemed right and achievable. Of course, the conversation with Darby wasn't going to be easy, but I was sure I could convince him to sign the papers, if not amicably, then, well, I had a backup plan. On my way home, I stopped by Talbot's. I needed my old friend's advice, his sober view of the situation. "So you've decided to send the little girl to that fancy pants school?" Talbot chuckled as he listened to my story. We were sitting on his veranda sipping whiskey despite the early hour. "Are you sure this is what Mabel wants?" "No," I admitted honestly. "I haven't even discussed it with her, but I've seen how she learns, how she grasps new ideas. She's smart, Talbot. Smarter than I was at her age, smarter than Darby. Regular school bores her, I can tell from her stories. And Lakeview might give her a challenge, get her brain working at full capacity." "Maybe," Talbot shrugged. "But don't forget that kids are more than just brains. They need friends, social connections. In a new school, she'd have to start from scratch. That could be hard." "You're right," I sighed. "I hadn't thought of that. Maybe I should talk to Mabel first, get her opinion." "Definitely," Talbot nodded. "One more thing. How do you plan to convince Darby to sign the papers? After your last conversation, I doubt he'll be thrilled with your idea." I grinned grimly. "I have an argument he won't be able to refuse." "And what's that?" "I'll tell him that if he doesn't sign the papers, I'll sue him for fraud. I have proof, the checks I wrote him for Mabel's tuition, and confirmation from the school that she never went there. I think that will convince him." Talbot whistled. "Tough, old man. Are you really willing to go through with this? He is your son, after all." I sipped my whiskey, feeling it burn my throat. "I hope it doesn't come to that. But if I have to choose between Mabel's future and Darby's comfort, I'll choose Mabel. Every time." We finished our whiskey in silence, each absorbed in his own thoughts. Then I thanked Talbot for his company and advice, and headed home. I had to get ready to talk to Mabel. I called Darby and asked permission to pick up my granddaughter for a few hours. He agreed without objection, apparently feeling guilty after our last conversation, or maybe he was just afraid to say no for fear of my reaction. Mabel was happy to see me, as always. She ran out of the house with her backpack, ready for adventure. I suggested a walk in the park, and she enthusiastically agreed. It was a clear but cold December day. We walked along the path by the lake, our breath turning into clouds of vapor. Mabel talked about school, about the book she was reading, about her plans for Christmas. I listened, enjoying her enthusiasm and spontaneity. Finally, when we sat down on a bench by the water, I decided it was time for a serious conversation. "Mabel," I began gently, "I wanted to talk to you about something important, about your future, about your education." She looked at me curiously. "What is it, grandfather?" "Remember when we talked about Lakeview Academy School?" I asked. "The one that your parents told me you went to school there?" She nodded, her face darkening a little. "I was there again yesterday," I continued, "to find out about the admission requirements. And I was thinking, maybe you'd really like to go there. For real, not just for show." Mabel's eyes widened in surprise. "Really? You want me to go to another school?" "Only if you want me to," I hastened to assure her. "Lakeview is a very good school. It has small classes, great teachers, and lots of interesting subjects that regular schools don't have. But it also means that you'll have to leave your friends behind, get used to a new place, new rules. It won't be easy," Mabel thought, rubbing the zipper of her jacket. "Is this the kind of school where you have to pay a lot of tuition?" she asked at last. "Yes," I nodded, "but don't worry about that. I'll pay directly to the school, not through your parents." She nodded, accepting that information. "And they really teach 3 languages and robotics there, like Dad said?" "Yes, it's true," I smiled. "Plus an expanded science, math, and art program. They even have their own planetarium and science lab." Mabel's eyes lit up at the mention of a lab. A real lab? With microscopes and everything? With microscopes, telescopes, all kinds of scientific equipment, I confirmed, delighted by her enthusiasm. It sounds amazing, she admitted. But, I encouraged her to continue. But I'm going to miss my friends, Emma and Jason and Lilia. We've been friends since first grade. I understand, I nodded. It's a hard decision and you don't have to make it right now. But there's one thing you should know. In 3 days, you're going to be tested at Lakeview. It doesn't obligate you to enroll there. It's just to see if their program is right for you. How about taking that test, getting an inside look at the school, maybe talking to some of the students and then deciding? Mabel thought for a moment longer, then nodded decisively. Okay, grandfather. I'll give it a try. But I'm not promising anything. Of course, honey, I hugged her. The decision is yours. I'll support you either way. On Wednesday, I picked Mabel up early from school and drove her to Lakeview Academy. She was nervous, rubbing the edge of her sweater the whole way. I tried to cheer her up, telling her that it wasn't an exam, just a test of knowledge, that there were no right or wrong answers. But I could see how important it was for her to make a good impression. At the school, we were greeted by Mrs. Inskip in person. She led us to the testing room where a young woman, the school psychologist as she introduced herself, was already waiting. The testing was to take about 2 hours, the academic part and the interview. Good luck, sunshine, I kissed Mabel on the forehead before leaving her with the examiners. Just be yourself. She nodded bravely and walked into the classroom. I stayed waiting in the hallway, probably more nervous than she was. Mrs. Inskip kept me company, showing me around the school, talking about the curriculum, the accomplishments of the students. I was impressed with everything I saw, the state-of-the-art equipment, the spacious classrooms, the enthusiastic teachers. But what impressed me most of all was the respect with which each child was treated, their unique abilities and interests. Our philosophy is simple, Mr. Havisham, Mrs. Inskip explained as we stood in the school library, surrounded by thousands of books. We believe that every child is gifted in their own way. Our job is to find those gifts and help them blossom. We don't just prepare children for standardized tests or prestigious universities. We prepare them for life, complex, changing, full of challenges. I listened to her, thinking about Mabel, her bright mind, her curiosity, her kindness. Yes, a school like this would be the perfect place for her, if only she wanted it. 2 hours later, the classroom doors opened and Mabel stepped out into the hallway. Her face was radiant, her eyes shining with excitement. "Grandfather!" she exclaimed, rushing over to me. "It was so cool! We solved such interesting problems, and I even got to talk to a real robot that could answer questions." I laughed in relief as I hugged her. It seems like the testing went well. Mrs. Inskip confirmed my thoughts by taking me aside while Mabel looked at the school's award stand. "Your granddaughter is an exceptionally gifted child, Mr. Havisham," she said quietly. "Her math and science scores are well above average for her age, and she shows amazing creativity in problem solving. We would love to have her in our school." "Thank you." I couldn't hold back a proud smile. "But the decision is still up to her." "Of course," Mrs. Inskip nodded. "But if I may offer some advice, I think she's already made it." And indeed, on the way home, Mabel couldn't stop talking about Lakeview, the science lab they showed her, the library with books to the ceiling, the telescope on the roof, the friendly students she met. "And you know what, Grandpa?" she said as we were pulling up to their house. "I want to study there. I really do. I'll miss my friends, but it's so exciting." "I'm glad you like it," I smiled. "Now we have to get your father to sign the papers." "He will," Mabel said confidently. "I know how to convince him." And indeed, to my surprise, Darby agreed to sign the papers almost without objection. Maybe it was Mabel's enthusiasm, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about the school. Or maybe he just realized it was the best thing he could do for his daughter, Or maybe he was afraid of my threat with the court. I'd hinted at it in our private conversation after Mabel went to bed. Laren was less cooperative. She grumbled about how it was a waste of money, that the education was no worse at the regular school, that it was all just my desire to control their family. But eventually, she signed the papers too, thanks in large part to the persistence of Darby, who, to my surprise, sided with me on the issue. "Papa's right," he said to his wife. "This is a chance for Mabel to get a better education. We can't deny it to her just because of our pride." Laren snorted but signed the papers. And so, in January, after Christmas vacation, Mabel started at Lakeview Academy. I personally drove her to her first day, helped her find her class, and get to know her teachers. She was a little nervous but more excited. New uniform, new backpack, new textbooks. "It's going to be okay," I told her goodbye. "Just be yourself." "Thank you, Grandpa," she hugged me tightly, "for everything." In the months that followed, I became much more involved in Mabel's school life. I attended parent-teacher conferences, often in place of Darby and Laren, who were too busy, helped with homework, and attended all school events. I watched her blossom in her new environment, make friends, and watch her mind absorb new knowledge. Of course, not everything was smooth sailing. Darby and Laren had to seriously reevaluate their lifestyle without the extra $5,000 monthly. Laren had to give up her regular shopping trips. Darby had to give up her golf club membership. They even put their new BMW up for sale, which, as it turned out, they couldn't afford without my help. But surprisingly, these changes seemed to be going in their favor. Darby started spending more time at home with his family instead of trying to impress his co-workers at the club. Laren found a full-time job instead of her former part-time job, and it seemed to give her a sense of independence and fulfillment she hadn't experienced before. As for my relationship with my son, it remained strained. Darby avoided long conversations with me, limiting himself to formal greetings when I came to pick up or drop off Mabel. Laren often didn't even come out to say hello, but I wasn't complaining. I got what I wanted. Mabel was getting a great education, and the money was going toward that, not her parents' whims. At the end of April, Lakeview Academy was having its spring concert, the first major event Mabel had ever participated in. She was to play the flute, an instrument she had only begun mastering 3 months earlier, but for which she had shown an amazing aptitude. On the day of the concert, I arrived early to get a good seat. To my surprise, I saw that Darby and Laren were already seated in the audience. It was the first time they had shown interest in their daughter's school life. I sat down next to them, nodding in greeting. Darby smiled awkwardly in return. "Dad," he said quietly as we waited for the concert to start, I wanted to thank you. For Mabel. For what you do for her." I looked at him in surprise. It was the first words of gratitude I'd heard from him in a while. "She likes it here," Darby continued. "She's happy. And I know what Laren and I did was wrong. I'm sorry. It wasn't a full-fledged apology, and I knew our relationship would never be the same. Too much had been said. Too many resentments had built up. But it was a small step in the right direction. She's a special girl," I said simply. "She deserves the best." Darby nodded, and we fell silent as the headmaster came on stage, announcing the start of the concert. When Mabel took the stage with her flute, I felt a lump come up in my throat. She looked so mature, so confident. She found her gaze in the audience and smiled at me before she began to play. And in that moment, listening to the pure, clear sounds of the flute, looking at my granddaughter, I knew I had made the right choice. Despite all the struggles, all the conflicts, all the money spent, it was worth it. For her sake, for her future, for this moment of pride and pure, unadulterated joy. Martha would be pleased. I was sure of it.